There's no denying that people love a good villain. Whether you hate to love them, love to hate them, or just plain love them, everybody has a soft spot for a bad guy whose presence they can't help but enjoy. In fact, some villains are so well liked that despite the fact that they've committed crimes worthy of several thousand life sentences, their fans are willing to turn a blind eye to their misdeeds. As far as I can tell, this is because of three main reasons. 30% of the time it's because the character is so well written, so well realized, that their words and actions carry a convincing gravitas that persuades people that this character, despite being fictional, has an understandable point, one that is worth the wrongs that they've committed. 10% of the time it's because a generally small portion of the audience agrees with the villain's actions and will even go so far as to fight tooth and nail to defend them, all while refusing to admit that they're at fault. And the other 60% is because the villain is hot. No, don't deny it, it's okay. You're not the first person to fall for a dangerously sultry fictional character, and you most certainly won't be the last. I mean, with the way sex appeal is sprinkled generously into most villains, it's kinda hard to blame anyone for doing so. Now, taking all of that into account, I want to address a couple of questions that are always at the back of my mind when I find myself actually sympathizing with the bad guy. How far is too far when it comes to the deeds of a villain? Is there such a thing as a completely irredeemable antagonist? Well, let's find out together, shall we? First of all, let's get this out of the way. Is it okay to like a villain despite their immorality? Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's all fiction. The important thing is that we don't hero worship them and apply their actions and moral code to the real world. Basically, try your best not to end up like this, dickhead. With that out of the way, let's talk about the actions of a villain and how far they would need to go for them to, in my opinion, be irredeemable. Now, violence is a pretty bog standard aspect of most villains, and a lot of the time it progresses to straight up murder. You'd be hard pressed to find a bad guy without a body count, and depending on the situation, killing can either be acceptable or terrible, horrible, no good, very bad. Let's look at a few examples, starting with the quote-unquote good. The rogues only targeting cops that come after them while avoiding killing innocents? Not so bad. Known killer Reaper opting to avoid executing a surrendered combatant? At least he's not committing war crimes. Templar Knight Alexander Anderson refusing to cleanse London of Protestants and unfaithful Catholics? Nice to see that his moral compass is still pointing north. Now let's tackle the bad. Harmer taking her albeit justified anger out on Fire Nation citizens who had nothing to do with her imprisonment? That's a bit terrible. Anakin slaughtering defenseless innocent younglings just because Emperor Balzac told him to?
Do it.
Horrible. Andrew Ryan's pursuit to maintain order in Rapture through silencing his competitors? Not good. Magneto attempting to commit genocide on not one but two separate occasions because of anti-mutant sentiment? Very, very bad. But actions are nothing without context, which is why I tried my best to at least explain why the latter villains did what they did. Whether their ends justify the means all comes down to three things for me: emotion, sanity, and setting. Does the character take pleasure in the immoral acts that they're committing? Is the character of sound mind or mentally stable when said acts are being perpetrated? And finally, does the setting affect the severity of the character's actions? Let's start with emotion. On one end of the scale, we have Mr. Freeze, a man who, when written right, is only a villain for one reason alone: to save and/or avenge his wife. He hates the fact that he has to break the law. He hates the fact that he has to lower himself to the level of supervillain to get what he wants. But it's the only way, or at least the only way he believes, he can save the life of his cryogenically frozen wife. It's obvious to anyone, including Batman, that he takes no joy in doing what he does. Then, on the other side of the scale, you have the Master, a cruel, sadistic genocide in physical form whose sole purpose is to cause chaos and bring misery to the Doctor. They have grand plans and schemes, that much is true, but they'll throw any and all of them away just to screw with the Doctor and his precious humans.
When I kill them, Doctor, it gives me a little buzz. Right here, in the hearts.
Emotionally, they revel in the carnage they cause, a far cry from the reluctant Mr. Freeze who is often forced into being a villain. Now, while emotion refers to the character's emotional state in which they commit their villainous acts, sanity refers to their mental state. For example, Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, was brainwashed into becoming a Hydra assassin. Morally and logically, he should be absolved of any and all actions he committed under the identity of the Winter Soldier. A greyer area is another former sidekick who returned from the dead as a more ruthless and violent version of their previous selves. Jason Todd, the Red Hood. After he was resurrected by Superboy Prime punching reality... God, I love comics. He was placed in a Lazarus pit so that his wounds could heal, which in turn drove him a little bit batty. So while Jason's brain chemistry was affected by the pit's waters, he still retained control of himself. His actions were his own, albeit more irrational, which means that while he is not completely blameless for the Red Hood's more unhinged actions, it is not entirely his fault.
But does it make it easier for you to think that my little dip in his fountain of youth turned me rabid? Or is this just the real me?
And in the area so grey it's almost black, we have Dracula from the Castlevania series. Now this guy wanted to wipe out the entirety of the human race. He wanted to commit genocide, perhaps the most irredeemable act a villain can commit. But as we were shown, this was because Dracula had completely lost his mind. Mentally, he had snapped after the unjust murder of his human wife. His actions weren't motivated by anger or rage, but grief. He simply wanted everything to end, and eventually he got that wish when he allowed Alucard to end his life after he broke down upon realizing he was about to murder his own son.
Your greatest gift to me, and I'm killing him. I must already be dead.
And finally, we come to setting. Now what exactly do I mean by setting? Well, it's quite simple really. Does the story's setting change how a villain's crime is perceived? A good example of this is Dragon Ball Z. Half of the Z fighters are former villains that range from petty thieves to goddamn genocidal warlords. I mean, Vegeta has destroyed planets and is both directly and indirectly responsible for the deaths of a large majority of the cast. His kill count is insane for anyone who should ever be considered a hero. But because Dragon Ball plays fast and loose with death and consequences, it's brushed to the side for the most part. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not watching DBZ for the tightly written narrative and complex exploration of morality. I want to see big beefy dudes punch other big beefy dudes and get hype over giant glowing balls. But then, in something like the Justice League animated series, it's much different. You have a similar situation to Vegeta teaming up with the Z-Fighters on Namek to fight Frieza, with the Justice League and Legion of Doom teaming up to fight Darkseid. Only after all is said and done, the Legion of Doom don't get to hang around the Watchtower and bone Batman. They're given a 5-second head start before the heroes track them down and throw them in jail where they belong. Because when it comes to the Justice League, punishing a person for the crimes they've committed is the entire point of the show. Hell, it's the entire point of the genre. Emotion, sanity, setting. With these three factors, we're able to partially deduce whether or not a villain deserves sympathy and whether or not they can be redeemed. All that's needed is one final ingredient: purpose. What exactly are the villain's goals? Their motives? The why of their plans? Are they a common criminal or a freedom fighter? Are they looking for personal gain or something more altruistic? When taking this into consideration, it's easy to suss out whether a villain is truly despicable or just misguided, and I've done exactly that. Using emotion, sanity, setting, and purpose, I've picked what I personally think are some of the most irredeemable villains in fiction that I personally know of. But before that, I just want to make 3 stipulations. I've avoided adding villains that are manifestations of evil like Darkseid, Aku, and the Lich, as well as devil analogues like Mephisto and Gaunter O'Dim, and primordial forces like Galactus and Desire. I've only included characters that are subject to the same morality as we are. Now then, let's get started. Zebediah Kilgrave. A truly depraved piece of garbage who used his mind control powers to abuse countless people, and while he didn't do anything to Jessica Jones physically, he shattered her mentally and made her an unwilling accessory to his crimes. He is such a little cockroach that most comic writers make it a point for him to get the ever-loving shit kicked out of him whenever he's shown up in the comics post-Alias. Griffith, a living incarnation of betrayal. His horrific acts committed during the eclipse have caused lasting physical and psychological damage to Guts and Casca, and after he opened up the astral world, he's responsible for the deaths of countless innocent people. Despite what he believes, Griffith has done everything wrong. Porky Minch, the epitome of the phrase little shit. Porky is pretty much responsible for all the grief and suffering in Earthbound and Mother 3. He's a narcissistic, petulant child throughout the entirety of his existence and would sooner end all life on the planet than share anything with anyone. And now for some quickfire, dishonorable mentions. Doflamingo, Ridley, Bonduroo, Dolores Umbridge, Hannibal Lecter, Carnage, Kefka, Reverse Flash.
It was me, Perry. I jerked you off at super speed so it'd seem like you nutted at just a woman's touch!
Patrick Bateman, Ted Farrow, Orochimaru, Frollo, Hojo, Iago, Mr. Sinister, Overhaul, Dio, Sephiroth, Nurse Ratched, pretty much all the Persona 5 palace rulers, and of course, the Joker, who I am convinced is actually sane and that his whole one bad day is all it takes to go full Looney Tunes is all an act. So there you have it, a list of what I believe to be some of the most despicable villains in fiction. Of course, there are a whole lot more characters that deserve to be on that list, but I decided to stop at 20 or else I'd wear my tongue ragged rattling them off. And while I have an intense hatred for all of these villains, I can't help but enjoy reading, watching and playing the stories they inhabit, as well as their individual characters. Well, except for Purple Man, and Umbridge, and Orochimaru, and Hojo, and you know what, let's just say that I enjoy hating them. Because while a villain may be absolutely irrevocably irredeemable, it doesn't mean that they're unenjoyable. Just remember, never, ever be that guy. Trust me, it's not a good look.
What? You gonna wash your hands? No, 'cause I'm evil.